The champagne flute slipped from Zhen Ting's fingers and shattered against the marble floor, the crack echoing beneath the chandeliers like a gunshot disguised as elegance. No one moved. Not the servers lining the walls, not the guests pretending not to stare, not even the violinist mid-note. The only sound was the faint roll of glass across polished stone. Zhen Ting stood at the center of the ballroom, white dress untouched, glasses glinting under golden light. Her posture was immaculate, controlled, deliberate. She did not look angry. She looked disappointed. "Pick it up," she said softly. A young attendant dropped to her knees immediately, hands trembling as shards bit into her skin. Blood dotted the marble. She didn't cry out. No one ever did. From the far end of the ballroom, Kang Eryun watched with folded arms. Black suit, white shirt, neck tattoo visible above the collar. His face unreadable. He did not interrupt. He never did. Power did not require volume, and fear did not require repetition. Blackcrest Manor was known for its security, its wealth, and its silence. Staff left without warning, reputations disappeared quietly, and everyone understood the single rule that governed the house: fear his fiancée. Some whispered they feared Zhen Ting more than they feared Kang Eryun himself, because Eryun ruled the city, but Zhen Ting ruled the air inside these walls. Then the doors opened, and Nantale walked in.
Dawn did not rise gently over Blackcrest Manor. It arrived in pale, restrained light that slid across the marble floors and gilded the edges of chandeliers left dim from the night before. The mansion looked almost harmless in the early hour, like a cathedral without a congregation. Nantale stepped through the iron gates just as the sky shifted from indigo to gray. She carried one small bag. Nothing about her movement suggested uncertainty. Her black uniform was pressed, the white apron crisp. The gold cross at her throat caught the faint morning light, as if it too refused to hide. The doors opened before she reached them. A tall woman with silver-threaded hair and a posture carved from discipline waited inside. "You're early," she said, not unkindly. "Punctual," Nantale replied. The woman studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "I am Virile Morn, head of staff. Follow me." The foyer swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Marble, gold accents, portraits that seemed to watch without blinking. Everything inside Blackcrest Manor was polished to perfection, including the silence. "Rules are simple," Virile said, as they passed a corridor lined with closed doors. "Do not speak unless addressed. Do not question instructions. And never," she hesitated, as if the next words carried weight, "never mistake kindness for weakness." Nantale absorbed the warning without comment. In the East Wing, the household staff gathered for the morning briefing. Conversations died the second Nantale entered the room. Some looked at her uniform, others looked at the floor. A few looked at her face, curious, then quickly looked away. One young attendant leaned close enough to whisper, "People don't last here." Nantale met her eyes calmly. "I intend to." The statement wasn't brave. It wasn't defiant. It was simple fact. A hush rippled across the room when heels clicked against marble in the adjoining hall. Zhen Ting did not rush her entrance. She appeared the way sunrise touches glass, gradually, deliberately. Even at this hour, her white dress was immaculate. Her glasses framed eyes that assessed before they acknowledged. Her gaze moved over the staff, pausing briefly at each bowed head. Then it landed on Nantale. There was no anger, no immediate hostility, only evaluation. "You're the new one," Zhen Ting said softly. "Yes." "Not ma'am, not miss. Just yes." A small flicker passed through Zhen Ting's expression, so subtle most would have missed it. "Lift your chin," she instructed. Nantale did. Their eyes met. The room seemed to contract, like air being drawn out of it. Most people blinked first. Nantale did not. Behind Zhen Ting, in the archway beyond the corridor, Kang Eryun stood watching. Black suit, arms crossed, still as sculpture. He noticed a pause. Zhen Ting noticed that he noticed. The moment lasted no longer than a breath. Then Zhen Ting smiled. "Welcome to Blackcrest Manor," she said. It sounded like a blessing. It was not. Breakfast at Blackcrest Manor unfolded like a ceremony no one had chosen, but everyone understood. Long glass windows filtered in the morning light, soft and pale against the gold-trimmed walls. Silverware rested in exact alignment. Porcelain cups waited on their saucers like obedient. Nantale replied evenly. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Not defensive, not apologetic. Certain. The air shifted, subtle but undeniable. Zhen Ting leaned back in her chair, studying her. When I speak, she said softly, you listen. I am listening. Then lower your eyes. There it was. The rule. It had never been written. It didn't need to be. Everyone in the mansion knew it. Eye contact was confrontation. Eye contact was challenge. Eye contact was the smallest rebellion a servant could commit. Around them, staff froze in place. No one dared breathe too loudly. Nantale stood upright, hands relaxed at her sides. The gold cross at her neck rested against her collarbone, unmoving. Her jaw did not tighten, her shoulders did not tense. She did not lower her gaze. I was hired to work, she said calmly, not to look away. The sentence was simple, but it echoed. Zhen Ting's fingers curled lightly around her teacup. The porcelain did not shake, but something behind her glasses flickered, annoyance sharpened by disbelief. Across the table, Kang Eryun looked up from his documents. He did not speak, he did not intervene. He simply watched. The silence lengthened, stretching thin and dangerous. Most people at this point corrected themselves. They bowed their heads, they apologized. They chose survival. Nantale chose stillness. Her eyes did not harden, they did not plead. They remained steady, unafraid. For the first time since she entered the manor, Zhen Ting felt it clearly. This was not defiance born of anger. It was refusal born of certainty. Be careful, Zhen Ting said at last, her voice smooth again. Only to those who expect fear, Nantale answered quietly. A glass somewhere in the room trembled against its saucer. Kang Eryun's gaze shifted from Nantale to Zhen Ting and back again. Something unreadable passed across his face before it disappeared. Continue, he said calmly. The staff exhaled almost in unison. Breakfast resumed. But something had changed. The rule had been spoken aloud, and it had not been obeyed. By mid-morning, the mansion had already decided what Nantale was, a mistake. Zhen Ting did not address the breakfast exchange again. She did not need to. Correction, at Blackcrest Manor was never loud. It was engineered. Nantale was reassigned before noon. Not to the guest wing, not to the dining hall. The west corridor. The oldest stretch of the manor, rarely used, perpetually dusty despite constant upkeep. Chandeliers draped in protective cloth, windows that overlooked nothing but trimmed hedges and iron fencing. A place designed to feel forgotten. Viral Morn delivered the order without meeting Nantale's eyes. The Fiancée requests personal oversight of your work today. Oversight. The word carried weight. Buckets were placed at Nantale's feet, a stack of linen towels, a brush more suited for scrubbing stone than marble. The floors, Viral said quietly, by hand. There were machines for this. Everyone knew it. Nantale rolled up her sleeves. Water soaked through the fabric at her wrists as she knelt on polished stone. The marble was cold, the corridor long. Each stroke of the brush echoed faintly against the walls. Footsteps approached. Zhen Ting appeared at the far end of the hall, white dress unwrinkled, glasses resting precisely against her face. She did not step into the water pooled near Nantale's knees. She remained just outside its reach. You missed a spot, she said lightly. Nantale glanced at the floor. The marble gleamed. I'll redo it, she replied. Zhen Ting smiled faintly. Good. An hour passed, then another. Guests began arriving for an afternoon planning session in the East Wing, the corridor filled with distant conversation and controlled laughter. Word traveled quickly inside the manor. The new hire was on her knees. By late afternoon, Nantale's palms were raw, her uniform damp at the hem, the gold cross at her throat pressed against skin warmed by exertion. Still, her breathing remained even. Zhen Ting returned just before sunset. You may stand, she instructed. Nantale rose slowly, wiping her hands against a towel. Zhen Ting stepped closer this time, close enough to study her face. Tell me, she said softly,
"Do you regret your confidence this morning?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. Zhen Ting's gaze sharpened. "Most people learn quickly." "I have," Nantale said. A pause. "And what have you learned?" "That effort doesn't frighten me." The corridor felt narrower. Zhen Ting reached out, not to strike, not to shove, but to tilt Nantale's chin upward with 2 fingers. The gesture was delicate, calculated. "Fear is not about effort," she murmured. "It's about position." Nantale held her gaze again, and position can change. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Zhen Ting withdrew her hand, smoothing an invisible crease in her dress. "We'll see," she said. She turned and walked away, heels clicking against marble with precise rhythm. Behind her, Nantale knelt once more, not because she had been forced, but because the floor still needed finishing. And down the hall, unseen but aware, Kang Eryun watched from the shadows. The test had been given. It had not been passed. It had not been failed, but it had not produced fear.
By the next morning, the shift was subtle but deliberate. Nantale noticed it first in the kitchen. Conversations that once hummed quietly over boiling kettles dissolved when she entered. A pair of attendants who had been standing shoulder to shoulder separated without explanation. Someone moved her assigned utensils to a lower drawer. Another avoided brushing past her, choosing the longer path around the counter instead. No one was cruel. They were careful. Careful was worse. Vera lay more and handed her a schedule without the usual instructions. "You'll rotate independently today," she said, voice neutral. "No pair assignments." Nantale nodded. Understood. Blackcrest Manor functioned on rhythm. Staff moved in synchronized patterns, rarely alone. Isolation disrupted that rhythm. It turned simple tasks into silent statements. In the library, she dusted shelves that did not need dusting. In the guest suite, she replaced linens already replaced. Every time she stepped into a room, the others found a reason to step out. A young attendant, Elowen Saren, hovered near the stairwell as Nantale passed. "They're watching," Elowen whispered quickly. "If we talk, it becomes a problem." "For you?" Nantale asked. "For everyone." Elowen lowered her eyes and hurried away. By afternoon, Nantale's name had stopped being spoken altogether. She was referred to only in gesture, a tilt of the head, a slight nod in her direction, the absence of acknowledgement. Zhen Ting appeared near sunset. She stood at the balcony overlooking the inner courtyard, hands resting lightly on the railing. The breeze lifted a strand of her dark hair, though the rest remained perfectly arranged. "You seem quiet today," she observed without turning. "I've been working," Nantale replied. Zhen Ting finally faced her. "And no one has troubled you?" "No." "That's good." A faint smile curved her lips. Harmony is important in a household. Below them, 2 attendants crossed the courtyard. They did not look up. Zhen Ting gestured toward the view. "Do you see how smoothly everything runs?" "Yes." "It runs because everyone understands their place." Nantale did not answer. Zhen Ting studied her reflection in the balcony glass, watching Nantale through it rather than directly. "Isolation can be clarifying," she said softly. "It reminds people what they risk." Nantale's posture remained straight. "I'm not alone." The statement lingered between them. Zhen Ting's gaze flickered. "No?" "No." A long pause followed, filled only by the distant sound of fountain water. Zhen Ting stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You mistake silence for support." "Do you?" Nantale asked calmly. For a fraction of a second, something tightened behind Zhen Ting's glasses. From the courtyard archway below, Kang Eryun stood partially obscured by shadow, arms folded, watching the balcony. Zhen Ting noticed him. Nantale did not look down. "I'm giving you space to reconsider your posture," Zhen Ting said, her tone smoothing again. "You're new. Adjustment takes time." "I've adjusted," Nantale replied. Zhen Ting's smile returned, thinner now. "We'll see." She turned and walked inside, leaving Nantale alone on the balcony. Alone, but not erased. In the fading light, Nantale remained where she stood, steady against the quiet. And below, Kang Eryun did not look away. The accusation came just before dinner, timed with precision. Guests had begun arriving, measured laughter drifting through the halls, perfume mingling with polished wood and candlelight. The manor felt alive in the way it only did when wealth gathered under one roof. Nantale was adjusting the floral arrangement near the grand staircase when Viralai's voice cut cleanly through the air. "Everyone to the salon." It wasn't loud, but it carried. Staff moved quickly. Guests paused mid-conversation. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, like a curtain being drawn back before a performance.
Zhen Ting stood near the fireplace, white dress luminous against the dark paneled walls. Her glasses rested lower on her nose, as if she had been interrupted during something important. On the low table before her lay a velvet box, open. Inside, empty. "My bracelet," she said calmly. "It was here." Silence spread outward like ink in water. Kang Eryun stood near the windows, hands folded behind his back. He did not look surprised. He did not look concerned. He simply watched. Zhen Ting's gaze moved slowly across the assembled staff, deliberate, unhurried, until it stopped at Nantale. "You were assigned to the staircase," she said softly. "Yes." "And you passed through this room?" "Yes." A faint murmur rippled through the guests, not loud enough to be disruptive, just enough to feed curiosity. Zhen Ting lifted the empty box between her fingers. "The bracelet is not inexpensive." "I'm sure it isn't," Nantale replied. The tone was even. Zhen Ting tilted her head slightly. "Would you care to explain its absence?" Nantale did not rush her answer. She glanced at the box, at the surrounding staff, at the guests who pretended not to stare. Then she looked at Zhen Ting. "I didn't take it." The simplicity of it almost felt inappropriate. Zhen Ting smiled sharply. "Most people would say that. I'm not most people." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Zhen Ting gestured lightly toward the security personnel stationed near the door. "Search her." A collective breath caught in several throats. Nantale extended her arms before anyone could touch her. "Go ahead," she said. The search was thorough, professional, degrading. Nothing was found. Zhen Ting's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the velvet box. "Strange," she murmured. "Yes," Nantale agreed. For a moment, the room teetered between accusation and uncertainty. Then Nantale spoke again. "May I?" She stepped forward and lifted the velvet box gently from the table. She turned it over once, twice, her thumb pressed along the underside seam. There was a faint click. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside, the bracelet stood neatly coiled. The silence that followed was not fearful. It was different. Zhen Ting did not reach for it immediately. Her expression remained controlled, but something in her stillness felt tighter. "I suppose," she said smoothly. "The clasp must have caught." "Of course," Nantale replied. Across the room, Kang Eryun's gaze lingered on the open compartment. He said nothing. But this time, the silence did not belong to Zhen Ting. It belonged to doubt. By evening, the ballroom had transformed. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, scattering light across polished marble and gold-trimmed columns. A string quartet played near the far wall, their music delicate enough to sound expensive. Laughter drifted in careful intervals. Every detail, every plate, every glass, every breath was curated. Dinner at Blackcrest Manor was never just a meal. It was a display. Nantale stood among the serving staff, posture precise, movements controlled. Her black uniform contrasted sharply against the shimmer of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. The gold cross at her collarbone caught the chandelier light each time she turned. At the center of the long glass table sat Zhen Ting, radiant in white. Her glasses reflected candlelight as she listened to a guest recount a story about international acquisitions. She smiled at the appropriate moments. Elegant, composed. Kang Eryun occupied the seat beside her, silent but unmistakably powerful. His presence required no effort. Conversation steadily bent around him. As the main course was served, Zhen Ting lifted her wine glass slightly. "Tonight," she said lightly, "I'd like to acknowledge our newest addition." The music softened. Forks paused. Nantale felt the shift before her name was spoken. "Nantale," Zhen Ting continued. "Step forward." The room turned. Nantale did not hesitate. She approached the head of the table, stopping at a respectful distance. Zhen Ting regarded her thoughtfully. "It's important," she said to the guests, "that staff understand the culture of this house. Precision, obedience, awareness." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the table. "Earlier this week," Zhen Ting went on, "we had a minor misunderstanding regarding position." The word lingered.
Several guests leaned forward with discreet curiosity. Zhen Ting gestured toward the empty space beside her chair. Kneel. The single syllable landed like glass on marble. Across the ballroom, attendants froze mid-step. Nantale's expression did not change. Zhen Ting's smile remained gentle. It's a simple demonstration. In this house, respect is visible. The silence thickened. Kang Eryun did not look at Nantale. He watched Zhen Ting instead. Seconds stretched. Nantale lowered her gaze, not in submission, but in thought. Then she looked back up. I serve, she said calmly. I do not kneel. The room felt suddenly smaller. A guest coughed into a napkin. Another shifted in her seat. Zhen Ting's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Refusal, she said softly, is not a good look. Humiliation rarely is, Nantale replied. A sharp intake of breath moved through the table. Zhen Ting stood. The movement was slow, controlled, deliberate. She stepped closer to Nantale, close enough for only the front row of guests to hear her next words. You mistake tolerance for permission. And you mistake silence for agreement, Nantale answered. For a fraction of a second, Zhen Ting's composure thinned. The tension vibrated beneath crystal and gold. Kang Eryun rose to his feet, not to intervene, not to command, but to observe from a new angle. The quartet had stopped playing. The entire ballroom waited. Dinner was no longer the spectacle. Power was. The silence did not break. It hardened. Zhen Ting stood inches from Nantale, the glow of chandeliers softening nothing about the moment. Guests watched without appearing to watch. Crystal trembled faintly against porcelain. Even the air felt held in place. You forget yourself, Zhen Ting said quietly. Her hand moved before anyone could register the decision. It was swift, precise, designed to humiliate, not wound. But Nantale had been watching. Her fingers closed around Zhen Ting's wrist midair, not violently, not roughly, firmly. The motion stopped between them, frozen in the golden light. A collective breath fractured through the room. For the first time, Zhen Ting's composure flickered openly. Her eyes widened behind the lenses of her glasses, not from pain, but from interruption. No one had ever stopped her before. Nantale held her gaze. The grip was steady, controlled, a boundary drawn in skin and bone. You don't get to do that, gently said, voice low enough that only the nearest guests heard. The words were not loud, but they carried. Zhen Ting tried to pull her hand free. Nantale released it at once. The release should have ended it. It didn't. The echo of that halted strike had already moved through the ballroom like a crack spreading through glass. And something in Zhen Ting snapped, not outwardly, not chaotically, but inwardly, where pride burns hottest. Her hand moved again. This time, Nantale did not stop it. The slap rang across marble. Sharp, clean, unmistakable. Nantale's head turned with the force. A strand of hair loosened from her bun. The gold cross at her neck shifted against her skin. The sound ricocheted off crystal and stone. No one moved. For a heartbeat, Nantale stood taller, breathing controlled, as if she had restored order. Then Nantale looked back at her, slowly, deliberately. There was no fury in her eyes, only decision. Her arm moved, not reckless, not wild, measured. Her palm struck Zhen Ting's cheek with equal force. The impact twisted the elegant line of white fabric. Nantale's glasses slipped sideways. Her dark hair flew across her face in a sudden, violent arc. The sound was louder, not because it was harder, but because no one expected it. The ballroom inhaled in unison.
Nantale staggered half a step, catching herself before she fell. Her hand lifted instinctively to her cheek, disbelief slashing through her features before she masked it. She looked smaller, not physically, but in something deeper. Across the room, Kang Eryun did not step forward. He did not bark an order. He did not call security. He simply watched. And that was the fracture, because power inside Blackcrest Manor had always been reinforced by his silence. Tonight, his silence meant something else. It did not protect her. It did not condemn Nantale. It left the moment exposed. Nantale lowered her hand slowly. The red mark on her cheek stood in stark contrast to the white of her dress. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided looking at her entirely. The rule had been broken, publicly. And fear, once disproven in front of witnesses, does not return easily. Nantale did not speak. She did not apologize. She did not kneel. She simply stepped back into place, posture straight, breathing steady. The marble floor had heard it. The chandeliers had seen it. And something inside Blackcrest Manor had cracked beyond repair.
The mark on Zhen Ting's cheek deepened before it faded. It was the only visible thing in the ballroom that refused to pretend nothing had happened. No one applauded. No one gasped. The quartet remained motionless, bows hovering just above strings. Glasses trembled faintly against saucers as guests recalculated their expressions. Zhen Ting straightened first. Her glasses were adjusted with measured fingers, her posture reset. The white dress fell back into place, as if fabric could erase memory. "Security," she said evenly. The word did not carry the same weight it once had. Two men near the entrance glanced instinctively toward Kang Eryun before moving. He hadn't spoken, but he had not nodded either. They stopped. The pause was small. It was devastating. Zhen Ting felt it. Her gaze shifted to Eryun slowly, deliberately, in expectation without words. He stepped forward at last, not toward Nantale, toward the center of the room. His movements were unhurried, the way someone walks when they own the ground beneath them. The neck tattoo curved against his collar as he tilted his head slightly, surveying the room not for chaos, but for reaction. "Resume dinner," he said calmly. The simplicity of it cut sharper than any raised voice. A murmur rippled through the guests, unsure whether to comply. Then chairs scraped softly against marble. Someone forced a quiet laugh. The quartet began playing again, hesitant at first, then steadier. Zhen Ting remained standing. "Eryun," she said, almost gently. He did not look at her immediately. When he did, his expression was unchanged. "There will be no scene," he replied. The words were neutral, but they were not for Nantale. Zhen Ting's jaw tightened. "She struck me," she said. "Yes." The single syllable landed between them. And nothing. It was not a defense. It was not a reprimand. It was absence. Across the room, Nantale stood where she had stepped back, hands relaxed at her sides. She did not look victorious. She did not look relieved. She looked steady. Eryun's gaze moved to her briefly, measured, unreadable, then returned to the room. "Blackcrest Manor does not unravel over emotion," he said. "We maintain composure." The phrasing was precise. Emotion. Not disrespect, not assault. Emotion. A faint shift passed through the guests, subtle, observant. They were witnessing something more significant than a slap. They were witnessing recalibration. Zhen Ting's authority had always drawn strength from his silence. Tonight, his silence did not shield her. It equalized the moment. "Dinner continues," Eryun repeated. This time there was no hesitation. Staff resumed service. Conversations restarted, though lower now, cautious. Zhen Ting remained still for a fraction longer, eyes fixed on Eryun's face as if searching for confirmation that had always been there before. It wasn't. At last she returned to her seat. The red mark on her cheek glowed beneath chandelier light, undeniable. Across the marble floor, power had not changed hands, but it had shifted, and everyone in the ballroom felt it. By morning, the ballroom had been restored. No mark remained on the marble, no glass lay shattered. The quartet's chairs had been removed. If someone had entered without context, they would have found nothing unusual. Blackcrest Manor specialized in erasure. But absence leaves residue. Zhen Ting did not appear at breakfast. By midday, word moved quietly through the corridors. Her belongings were being packed, not hurriedly, not dramatically, efficiently.
Nantale passed the east wing as two attendants carried white garment bags toward the private entrance. No one spoke, no one stared. Zhen Ting emerged shortly after. She wore a cream coat this time, structured and immaculate. The faint discoloration on her cheek had faded to memory. Her glasses were perfectly aligned. She paused near the foyer, gaze sweeping the hall once, not searching, simply acknowledging. When her eyes met Nantale's across the marble expanse, there was no fury in them now, only something colder. "You've made your point," Zhen Ting said evenly. "I didn't come to make one," Nantale replied. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Zhen Ting's lips. "That may be the difference between us." The front doors opened. No one escorted her out. No one needed to. Her heels clicked once, twice, and then the sound dissolved beyond the gates. The manor exhaled. The staff moved differently that afternoon. Conversations resurfaced in careful fragments. Shoulders loosened. Eye contact returned in brief, uncertain exchanges. Fear had not vanished, but it no longer ruled. Kang Eryun summoned Nantale before dusk. She entered his study alone. The room was dimmer than the ballroom had ever been. Shelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a desk carved from dark wood. He stood near the window, back to her, city skyline stretching beyond glass. "You could stay," he said without turning. Nantale considered the words. "I wasn't hired to replace anyone," she replied. He faced her then. "You weren't." Silence lingered between them, not heavy, not strained. "You changed the balance here," he continued. "That is not a small thing." "I enforced a boundary," she said calmly. "Balance was your responsibility." The honesty did not offend him. It sharpened something thoughtful in his expression. "And now?" he asked. "Now I leave," she said. There was no resignation in her voice, only choice. She departed Blackcrest Manor before nightfall, carrying the same small bag she had arrived with. Months passed. The mansion remained standing. Staff turnover slowed. Dinner gatherings resumed, but without spectacle. One late afternoon, Nantale stood outside a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, sunlight soft against brick and glass. A black car pulled to the curb. Kang Eryun stepped out alone. No entourage, no display. He approached her without urgency. "I'm not here to hire you," he said.
"I'm not here to hire you."
She raised an
No?
eyebrow slightly.
I'm
"No.
here to ask if you'd consider
I'm
something
here to
else.
ask if you'd consider something else." "Which is?" "A partnership," he replied. The word hung between them, not romantic, not transactional. Respectful. You don't need obedience. You need someone who won't look away. For a moment, Nantale said nothing. Then she allowed herself the smallest smile. Power, she understood now, was not in the strike. It was in the refusal to kneel. And this time, the choice was entirely hers.